Beatboxing?
I
No.
feel like you secretly get down.
What was that?
I feel like you secretly get down.
Yeah? You think so? I appreciate that. Alright. I'm sending out the stream link. That is for streamers. And then, oh, that's very kind of you, Justin, to give Jake a thumbs up.
I'm just trying to lift people up.
Good, man. I like that. Positive vibes. All right. We have a pretty jam-packed class today. This is supposed to be a Saturday class, so there's a ton of activities. We're going to skip some. Some of them I'll kind of just go through a little bit faster with everyone. But the gist of today's class is to get a really good understanding of NPM, what you can do with it, why it exists, and then use a little bit more, a couple more APIs from Node, right? So just keep us familiar with Node and how that works. And then at the end of class, we'll get a really cool tool called Inquirer that is a command line tool, so you can build these cool command line processes where it's like, hey, how old are you? What's your name? Blah, blah, blah. And it has these really nice formatted questions, and then it can give you a nice detailed response at the end. So it's pretty cool. You can make some pretty cool stuff with it. Anyway, to get started, though, find activity 20, command sort, and do it. You can go ahead and do it with the group if you want. But I recommend you look into Stack Overflow and you start Googling how to help you do this if you don't know, because basically what you have to do is take numbers from the command line and sort them numerically. So you're going to have to take them from strings, turn them into numbers, and then you have to sort them. So you're going to have to Google. We're not giving you any hints. Anyway, do that.
There's been like a couple Saturdays, I don't know, who I was talking to, like a couple Saturdays ago, we looked into like an algorithm, like bubble sort or something.
Yes, but you don't have to implement it yourself.
Oh.
Google how to do it in JavaScript.
Okay.
How to sort an array of integers in Node.
Display that in the terminal, right? Or say that in the file, or in the sort.
Just once it's sorted, just console log it. Just get it sorted and console log it. The thing is, you got to take it from the command line, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to parse the command line. You have to make sure you don't have any crap from the command line you don't want, stuff like that. You make sure everything's a number. right. Let's go over this one. Did anyone finish? Oh, a couple people did. Nice. Nice. Cool. All right, so let's cover it. So, what did we have to do? We have to take in some numbers on the command line. We have to turn them into numbers, and then we have to sort them, right? Quick exercise. Get back in the groove. Get us ready for this Wednesday class. Okay, so first things first. Let's get stuff from the command line. So we can use our process.argv and just put them into a new array for us to make it nice and easy, so we don't kind of type process.argv everywhere, right? Let's create a new array for the numbers. So there's somewhere nice to put them. We know that they're numbers. All right, now we need to loop through the arguments. Since we're using process argv, we need to start at 2, right? Because what? Yeah, node in the script, right? It's the stuff we're calling, basically. Okay, so what do we gotta do? We gotta turn these arguments that we're assuming are numbers. We can just make the assumption for now into numbers from whatever they are on the command line, which is always a string. So we can do nums.push, and then we can do parse float args I, right? Now, could we use our for of or our for in or something in this particular scenario? Does anyone know?
No,
No, we couldn't. Why?
because we want to start at 2, we don't want to start at
Exactly, because we want to start at index 2, not index 0. So when you want to start at a specific index, you need to use a traditional for loop, and that's why they're still very valuable. Alright, so now theoretically our numbers should be all parsed. So why don't we just go ahead and test it at this point. This is a good place to test it at. So we can do, I'll go to unsolved here, go command sort unsolved 1, 2, 3. There we go. We have an array of 1, 2, and 3. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and put them in backwards. 3, 2, 1. Right? So theoretically, when we pass in 3, 2, 1, at the end of this exercise, we should get 1, 2, and 3. Right? So let's do nums. Now, if you were to Google or inspect in VS Code, you'll find that there is actually a sort function on the array. And it takes in this crazy thing, a compare function. It takes in an A and a B and returns a number. Okay? So comparator functions in programming have special rules. They take in an A parameter and a B parameter because you're comparing two things, and they return a number, -1, 0, or 1. If the result is -1 or less than 0, A is less than B. If the result is 0, A and B are equal. If B is greater than A, then the result is greater than 0. So there's an easy way to calculate that. And that is A minus B. Right? Because if, say, A is 1 and B is 2, we're going to get -1. A is smaller than B, so we're going to have B come first. Say A is 2, B is 2, we're going to get a 0. That means they're equal and don't do anything. Say A is 2, B is 1, we're going to get 1. A is bigger than B, so we'll swap them in the array. Now, I'm fairly confident that this returns the sorted array, so we can wrap it in a console log and see what happens. Okay, shut up, GitLens. So there you go. If we put in our command line arguments, 3, 2, 1, 3 is bigger than 2, which is bigger than 1, we know that if we sort them, sorting is always an ascending order first between smallest to largest. They're going to be reversed, and there we have it, they're reversed. What if we make it more complicated? 100 to 60, 11.45. Crazy number. Oh, yep, I'm doing commas. Don't do that, that would have been bad. Parse float would not be happy with me. And then we'll do 2 again. Nice. sorted it appropriately. Didn't care about the type of number because the math is simple. Right? Now, I wouldn't have expected you to know about the sort function. I would not have expected you to know about comparators. That's why you needed to Google this one. And those things they can get pretty sophisticated too, because you can imagine you can compare any two things, right? As long as you come up with a number to attribute to some sort of sort order. So if A was an object with 20 properties and B was the same object or a similar object with 20 properties, you could compare any number of properties. Say you wanted to sort by name or whatever, you could do that, right? So yeah, it's actually quite simple to do once you know how to do it. It's just kind of hard to get there, right? So any questions on this? It's warm-up activity of ours. Nope. Cool. All right. Well, let's jump into a little review.
I use that MGM node natural sort.
You use a node module?
Yeah.
Use the sort package that you downloaded or something? Nice. That's a good idea too. So you can always find a package that does the functionality and you can use that as well. So that is a great solution. Good job. All right. So let's take a look at something we saw on Monday. Everyone remember this? Yeah? Come on. You can raise your hands for me, please.
Oh, yeah.
Some form. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sweet. Nice. I'm supposed to, keep you guys involved, right? It's instructor to student interaction. If I don't do that, apparently you won't learn anything in this class. Maybe true. I don't know. Depends on you. So, anyway, we saw this code on Monday, or code that was very similar. We have this request module, and request is a function that allows us to make a request to a web page, or an API endpoint, bless you, or something along those lines, right? So, what does this first line do, Mike? So this first line right here is where we're importing the package request, right? So remember how we have require and we do like fs and we get the file system functions? Or we had the exports that we defined and then we could require our own file and get that object out. We're effectively doing the same thing here with the request package, which is installed through NPM that we'll get into in a moment, so that we can access its information. And what it gives us is a function called request that we've named request here that we can then use to make these HTTP requests. Make a little bit more sense? Anyone have any questions on the requires or want any more of a refresher on the requires? We're gonna have to get used to them because you're gonna be using them a lot starting pretty soon. But yeah, they can be kind of interesting sometimes. They have a lot of weird caveats, so it's not always easy to remember all the rules. So the second line is some form of function. Kyle, what does it do?
That is basically like your AJAX call that you're using request, so it's going to take that URL and go grab that information you're requesting and bring it back.
Exactly, it's going to do that. Rolando, what are these three parameters and what do they mean?
Your function checks first to see if you have an error, and if it does, it'll quit. If not, it'll return an object with the response.
Okay. So this first parameter is the error, then? The supposed error?
Yeah.
The second?
Node returns object of error. It will return it to that variable.
Yes, if there's an error, it'll return it there. Otherwise, request gives us a response, and they also give us access to this body, which is what's coming back in the payload. Response, I think, also has access to the body if you wanted to deserialize it yourself, but you don't need to. Very good, thank you. And just like Rolando was saying, if we don't have an error and a response code says everything is A-OK, then we can console log the information coming back. Otherwise, we're not going to do anything. So let's try to run it. This one is 21, I think. So this is OMD request. Boom, it explodes. Can't find module request because I didn't do something. What did I not do? npm install. That is correct. So if I do an ls, I have this package JSON, right? So the package JSON is a pretty good indicator that you're going to want to do some sort of install. And here it has its dependencies listed. It's request. So if I do npm install, npm install, npm install, I got it. We did it. And then I do node omdb request, we get our movie rig. Any questions on what we just did? Anyone have any more things they want to be refreshed about, or we want to talk about again? So NPM is really important for the Node ecosystem. As I said on Monday, it is stands for the Node Package Manager. So one day you're writing a Node application, you decide, hey, this functionality I wrote is pretty general. I could probably take it out and I can let other people use it, right? It's not specific to my app. It really just helps me do something. In this case, request helps us make requests. So you could build a library like that, and this has been going on for a long, long time. And in the Node ecosystem, people decided to answer that with NPM. They said, okay, we want to share functionality, share utilities that people can use to make their lives a little bit easier. So like Adam, for instance, went and found a sorting tool to help him sort all the stuff on the command line, right? Those kinds of things. You can find those kinds of things all over the place, and they're on NPM. So if I go to NPM, if I go to npmjs.org, I find the NPM website. Now, visiting this website itself isn't going to be too important for you. Sometimes they have interesting package information, but knowing what it is and what it does is pretty important, right? So this is their main website. There's nothing too exciting here, but if we go to, I think it's browse star. If we go to npmjs.com/browse/dependent, I guess they changed to the URL. You can see some of the most dependent on packages in the Node community. And you can search through all kinds of packages here on NPM. So if you wanted to see if one existed, you could. So Lodash, for instance, is one of the most dependent requests that we've been using in some of these. Is the second most dependent on package in the entirety of NPM, which I will tell you, based off the size of the Node ecosystem and the amount of people that use it, that's pretty huge. As a matter of fact, if we click on this page, see information about request, it is downloaded 15 million times a week. So that's a lot. 15 million times a week someone runs npm install and gets that request package. Let's look at Lodash just out of curiosity. 18 million downloads a week. That's a lot. Those guys, I actually know one of the guys who's a major contributor on Lodash. He's kind of an asshole, but either way, he's a smart dude. Anyway, so you're on npm.js and you decide you want to find a package. For instance, we go look at request. We want to see more information about request. We can go ahead and search it, npmjs.com/package/request, and I'll go ahead and slack this out for you so you can follow along. Come on, if you would like. So what's on this page? Well, there's the README is the first tab that's opened up, and that one's really important. So in open source development, I know we talked about this a bit on your projects, but in open source development specifically, having a README is incredibly important because oftentimes code, even if it's written really well, isn't easy to wade through, right? Reading code is something we all do a lot of, and you'll do a lot of it in your career. But it can be really hard, especially if the person who wrote it is off the rocker, and the code is really complicated or just written poorly or something along those lines. So right here, having a good README is a good way to define what kind of things you can do with your package, how you can access the functionality of the package, how it works, stuff like that, right? And also notes about, hey, don't do this, this is how you contribute, this is how you build it, and all that fun stuff. So anyway, the README is a really great place to look, and NPM actually has a direct link to the README for pretty much everything, right? If there's a README in GitHub, it automatically links to it on NPM. So we can go and look and see all kinds of information about it. Awesome. You can click stuff and just automatically be redirected. Okay, well, I need a TLS. Anyway, the important thing is NPM is this gigantic repository of a bunch of code. So what if we wanted to use something slightly different? What if we wanted to use Axios, which is like request, but in my opinion a little bit better? Well, we could search for Axios. Axios is interesting because it can be used in Node and in the browser. Request can't, but Axios can. It's a good wrapper, so instead of doing AJAX calls directly, you can use Axios, which is way easier, and get that same stuff done. It tells you browser compatibility, it tells you how to install it, tells you how to install it with Bower if we were ever to get to that, which we won't in this class. If you were using just a CDN, shows you how to use it, right? So axios.get, and you pass in URL. That's equivalent to that $ AJAX stuff, or even the $get that we use with jQuery. That's kind of irritating to use, right? So this is just a competing package, and the point is NPM has all of this stuff. It's pretty easy to find it. It's a good resource, and it links you directly to the GitHub repo as well if you wanted to look at the source. So you just click homepage, github.com, and boom, we're on GitHub. We can see all the Axios source code, and we can kind of go through it. Now, one of the things I'll recommend to you, especially while you're beginning your journey into the world of development, is to read a lot of code. Find a lot of these things that we're going to use, Request.js, Inquirer that we're going to see later, or the weather APIs we're going to use later. Find their code on GitHub if they're open source, which pretty much everything we're going to use here is, and try to figure out how it works. Just read through it. Download the source, maybe use VS Code so you have better search functionality. Maybe even try to build it and get it to run locally and figure out how that process works. Point is, if you read a lot of code and you kind of inundate yourself with it, there is a little bit of learning through osmosis. Now, you won't become a better programmer per se. You won't understand it better, but you may understand how to organize things. You may understand how solid developers write code, and then you can learn from that, right? You may figure out a problem you're trying to solve. Hey, this guy had something similar. I just found the answer in this guy's code, right? So it's a pretty important thing. Anyway, NPM is a good resource for that if you decide to go down that route. So the important point, again, yeah, Alex?
So like in like simple instance, well, this one is like a marketplace, like a free marketplace for like different kind of features of what we've all made.
Yeah.
You get different, it's almost like, instead of using like normally Bootstrap, for example, has their own kind of source, and you can create cool things with that. So, and essentially like all these little things that you can use to build different kind of things, correct?
Yeah, so NPM is like a marketplace of code. It's all open source stuff that people have developed that you can download and use in your package, in your projects for free, as long as you're using NPM, which we all have. NPM? NPM is very widely used. I mean, some of those packages have 18 million downloads a week. That's a lot.
We're gonna get really familiar.
You're going to get very familiar. The rest of the class, you're going to be using this quite a bit. So, yeah, that's a good point, though. This is very much a marketplace of code. It's all free, thankfully. Now, there are some packages on here that are free to download, but then to actually use aren't. But they're pretty few and far between. The big ones they're on that most dependent on, all free. Code is usually MIT licensed even, which is the best kind of license. So, anyway, again, there's all this code for you to get to. It's easy to get to, easy to install, easy to use right away. So, one thing you should do as you're moving forward with these projects and in this class is find a package to help you do it if it's complicated, right? You're like, hey, this is really complex. We could write it, and if you want to learn it, great. But also think about, hey, do I need to write this HTTP library? No, there's like 50 of them out there. If you want to, on your own time, then do it to learn how HTTP works and all that. Okay, so what's an interesting package we can look at? Well, there's one called weather.js. Note the dash in there. That is important because this is the specific one we're going to use for the next exercise. Let's look at this NPM page. Okay, install it, weather-js. You require it just like request, right? So you have that require statement. And then you have this weather.find. It has a couple of options. The first option is to search, which is a location name or a zip code, for instance, a city, state, or even if we did, my zip code, 85028, right? And a degree type in Fahrenheit or Celsius, and then you get a response back. And your response has the classic pattern of error and result, and you can just console log the result, and you can see information, which they've documented right here, about that location and its current weather. So at this time, when they made this example, San Francisco, it tells you where it's at, its time zone, that tells you it's 70 degrees, the date that they did this, so last year sometime, right? So a lot of interesting info about the weather that you can get pretty easily with not a whole lot of work. So let's go ahead and look at an example here. All right. So if I CD into 23, nope, 22, sorry. I can't read. All right. So anyway, this is very similar to that example we just had, we just saw on NPM, except we're getting information from Anchorage, Alaska. And we can see we're going to get it in Fahrenheit, right? So why don't we go ahead and look and run it. Oh, it exploded because we did not do what? NPM install. Because there was a package JSON, we know we need to do NPM install. If you don't remember if you've installed, it's okay, just do it again because it's not going to affect anything. If you really want to know, just do ls if node modules exists, node underscore modules, you're good. So let's go node, let's run this. Cool. Now if I expand this, you'll see Anchorage, Alaska. It tells you where it's at. I don't know latitude, longitude. I have no idea. Like, I obviously know where Alaska is on the globe, but I couldn't tell you based off those numbers where that is. In Fahrenheit right now, it's 54. Oh, it's kind of nice there, right? Not too bad. Sky code, don't know what that is. Sky text, partly sunny, so that's good. Some other information about it. There's a little bit of wind. It's pretty humid. Feels like 54. Wow, that's nice. That's right on point, right? Good job, Alaska. And then some forecast information about it, right? So this is a pretty cool API. You could do a lot with it. And it's pretty easy to use, all things considered. You really just gotta give it a place and give it a degree. So let's see. It said we could use zip code. Why don't I do my zip code and run it again? Nope. Oh, Phoenix, Arizona. Nice. Nice, 81, mostly clear. That's surprising after yesterday. Feels like 83. Very humid for Arizona right now. A little bit of wind. Let's see. Are we going to get... Oh, thunderstorms, it says. That sucks. Couple thunderstorms potentially, and then sunny the rest of the week. And into the end of the week, right? Well, I guess Tuesday and Wednesday. It's doing yesterday's forecast, too. Interesting. So no more thunderstorms then. It should be sunny from here on out. Good. So right here too, there's one other thing we can add. JSON stringify will print stuff in a string format, but we can give it the third option with the 2 there, and we can do like a pretty print. So if I do a Control X, I clear, and I run it again, I get that, which isn't really fun to read, right? So if you go ahead and just pass in null and then the pretty print, you can kind of see a nicer printout of your JSON, right? That is just a little aside. Anyway, any questions on this weather API and how it works? Cool. I want to Slack out. I'm going to Slack out this NPM link for the weather API, and I want you with your table to kind of explore NPM, talk about it a little bit, find some cool packages, just get a good understanding of everything you can do on that website and all the stuff you can find.
That's city, that's state, kind of.
All right. Fist of 5, how are we feeling about NPM and kind of that whole ecosystem right now? Feeling pretty good? Cool. Good. Yeah, we're going to be using it a lot, so you definitely want to get used to it, used to perusing the repositories and kind of used to getting, using it, right? So we're going to move on to another activity for you all to participate in. So in this one, we're going to use another NPM module called the geocoder that we need that MapQuest API key for. So if you don't have it, start signing up now. It doesn't take long to get. It's not one you have to wait for. You get it right away. But you're going to need that API key, and then you can basically take this this node module. You can give it a location, and it'll geocode it, give you the latitude and longitude and kind of where it is in the world, right? So first things first, I'm going to have to do npm install. I'm going to have to npm install the package itself. You guys are going to have to probably do this in your example, I think. Let me look. Oh, no, never mind. Not yet. We're not there yet. Anyway, got to run npm install first. Got to make sure you have all the packages. And then we can go ahead and take, in the simpler example, so the first one, try to get this one done. Basically, you can give it a city and a state, and what you get back is going to be information about where it is in the world, right? So zip code, street number, it gives you some information, right? So that's really cool. Any city in any state, and it gives you the latitude and longitude, and then a little bit other info about it. You could try states in other countries if you'd like, but keeping it in the US will be easy for this example. The more challenging example is you can give it any address, like this address for this building, and you can put that in. It'll take it, put it into a nice format for the geocoder, and print out where exactly it is. So it gave me the zip code with the extra 4 and everything, the full street name, all kinds of stuff, right? So it's a pretty powerful API, again, to use pretty simply in terms of what you actually have to give the API. Now, building the format properly, well, that might be a different story. So right here we have node geocoder, and this is activity number 23 that you're going to be doing. So you're going to want to check out this node geocoder. You're going to figure out how you can either take a city and a state and get its geocode information, or take any address and get its information, right? So we'll give you about 20 minutes to work on that. Work on that with your table if you need to. You're not going to need a callback URL. What's in that stuff, you just need to replace the API key in your example, your unsolved file, and it'll work fine. What was that? Yeah, where it says put your API key or whatever. You just replace it with the one you got from MapQuest, and then then the API will work. Now you still have to put in the city and the state. But we have to figure out how the API works. That.
Oh wait, that has the consumer and the normal one. Oh wait, no, it's the consumer secret that I wanted to. Yeah, for the stuff that you're putting in. that. Yep, so console logged it. And then I tried to also do that orange.qstream or whatever, but I don't know. Where at.
He's returning something, that's all. That's his part. The only way you see them, yeah, you don't pay the money. You have to go into it now.
Login sometimes you triple. totally went very well.
Yeah, you know, it was a pretty good
Based
meeting.
on everything else I've seen.
Frustration plus all the time.
Plus.
Oh, I just looked on my.
You're late.
Can I just? I just want to get. Can I get rid of the blue circle with the number? That's all I want. That's all I want. Please let the alert just go away. I don't care. Oh, by the way, tomorrow's the 4th, so like that's when the review process ends. I don't know, man. I made it to the second round of like Java interview fucking interview. I don't know Java.
Well, I like that we used to maybe get this for like current services reminders. You know,
That's brutal. That is brutal. Yeah, there's two entities. One's really good, we should apply it. That's their service.
Holding it close.
There you go, Cody.
Shut Jason.
I got well, it's
You wouldn't stop talking to me when I got here.
There are a lot of things that are Jason's fault, so.
You can tell him I said that.
I'll let him know.
That's what I was. No, don't worry about it. That's what we want, man.
Or we should also jump to it and split it.
You already get the
You know, I had to work up with the 100 better.
Yeah, I did the same thing. It's like I was trying to install it, but it wasn't inside that uninstall folder.
Okay, let's go ahead and go over this. Fist of 5, how did we feel about this one? Okay, got some good numbers, some medium numbers, some lower numbers. All right, kind of all over the board. All right, yeah, this one was tough. It required a lot of work to figure out exactly how to use it. So the first thing is we wanted to know what this geocoder package does, right? And NPM is a good place to go to say, okay, well, what does it even do, and how do I do it? So we got a little bit of code delivered for us, and that was it required the package, it set up the options, and then it built the geocoder, right? So what we have to do is get stuff from the command line, put it into the proper format, and then use the geocoder API to like get this geocode information back. So if we look at this first example, we can kind of see how this might work. So we've got this stuff, right, already in our code. What we don't have is the next stuff. So here are two examples of how to use a geocoder, and then here's an example output, right? So one of them uses this function, this callback that we're familiar with. So this is the one we should use first. If you wanted to try the promise version, you can, but until we really understand those, we should stick to the callbacks. So this callback takes in some information here, some string, which I don't know French, but it looks like an address to me. And then a function which has our error and our result, right? So very similar to what we've been doing with the other APIs. And then we can just console the result. So that should be the first thing we try. Okay, this looks good. I'll put it here in the last step since use the geocoder object to search this address. Okay, well, this address is an address we can use. Why don't we just try it and see if it works? So first thing, remember we have to do npm install. Make sure we have geocoder. We can look, okay, so we have geocode.js. So we'll do node and just call geocode.js. And it worked. We got a whole bunch of information back. Cool. So obviously this code that we just copied and pasted does work. So now what do we need to do? We need to change it to work with our address, right? So first thing, take in command line arguments. So what do we want? Let's start with the simpler version and just get a city and a state. So we'll start with process argv2 is the city. And we'll do process argv3, we'll call it the state. So between the city and the state, we know we're going to need something to delineate that they're not the same word, right? So we'll just put a space in there. So now we should have an address, and we can put a console log in there to verify. And theoretically, if our concatenation routine worked, we should be able to get the geolocation of it. So at this point, it's a good place to stop and kind of try and test, right? So let's clear this. Clear. So we have this node geocode, so we need a city and a state. Bam. There we go. First challenge solved. City and the state, it works. Okay. Well, now we want to take an arbitrary address string. So addresses have quite a few spaces potentially, right? They have the street number, space street name, space city, state, zip code, whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff you could do. So how can we do this? Well, we know we're going to have a lot of arguments in the process argv, right? So one way we could do it is create an array, right? Call it address parts or something like that, and do a for loop, right? Let's do address parts.push and then process.rvi. And then how can we add them together? Well, we could also add them into one string in the same one if we wanted to. Or we can have them in a nice array and we could just do address parts.join and tell it to join with a space. And that'll give us the same address. But it's not well, let's assign it to the address variable. Let's do that. This also gives us an address. So if we console log it, let's do 92 Von Ave Gilbert Z. We get here. Cool, and you can see it printed it right here in a nice string. But this for loop, it's a lot of extra work. I don't really want to do that. So I can do process.argv.slice2 starting at second index.join and get the same thing. One line of code. Any questions on that? Slice takes the, it basically says give me an index, and starting at that index I'll take the rest of the array and put it somewhere else. Put it in a new array.
Is this an alternative loop?
Yeah, this is like an alternative to that for loop. If you want to get everything after the second index, you just do slice 2 and then you have a new array with everything after the second index.
So it's like a more compact way.
Yes, it's a more compact way, yes. Okay, any questions on this before we move on? Any more? Cool. So, if you go to your GitLab and you look under number 24, you're going to see this package json.zip. I want you to take that package JSON zip and with your group unzip it, see what's in there, and experiment with it.
drag this from a desktop, and then you have like this instruction. Your computer is a laptop with mine. Use my form possibly. Wow, they actually put this in my voice for like a minute before.
All right. So if you looked at this, which sounds like most of you did, so we go in here to number 24, and we have this package JSON zip, right? And I unzipped it right here, so we have this other 24 package JSON. And when I unzip it, you'll notice that there is a full application in here. There's the weatherdesk.js. There's a package JSON. There's a README. And then there's this node modules. So if we look at WeatherDesk, I mean, this is a whole bunch of information with the geocoding, right? So this is an interesting file, and we'll go over a little bit. But there's also a README about it, the full package JSON, and the node modules. What is this like? Well, this is an entire application, and if you can imagine if we were working in a group before we had something like NPM, we have all these dependencies, right? And we want to share the code. Before we have something like Git as well, we would have to zip it up and send it to each other. But this is kind of problematic. Kind of might be an understatement. It's very problematic for a lot of reasons. Well, for one, look right here. We have specific dependencies on Node geocoder and weather.js and all that fun stuff, right? Very specific dependencies. And they're packaged in this node modules folder, which, by the way, is huge. I mean, those are 2 packages, and look at all the stuff that comes with them. So, 1, this is a huge zip. But 2, if someone were to change one of those locally, or maybe the installed version in the node modules was different than the required one in the dependencies file, how would you know, right? So if someone just had these DLLs all bundled up with the application, sure, it's great when you unzip it and run it and everything works fine, but the moment someone changes something and forgets to tell someone or forgets to save the dependencies, or you're in a world of hurt. And it's a real pain in the butt. So package management really comes into play with this kind of stuff when you're sharing code and you're trying to share a project that has a lot of these dependencies, right? So this node modules folder, again, has everything in here. And if we go and look, you can see here's our weather.js. There's one of the things we wanted to install. And here's the node geocoder. So there's 2 out of like the 40 that are in there. So node modules is interesting because it also installs all the dependencies of the dependencies in the same folder, and that's why you see so many, because those 2 packages require all of those things. Yeah, Michael?
So what you're saying is That's why we have npm install, so we don't have to do this, right?
Yeah, so you don't have to unzip it. You can just do npm install. npm will download those requirements and build it for you, right?
Now, my next question is, when you run npm install, where does that go? Is that temporary space, or?
That's a good question. Why don't we? I'm gonna just delete this zip right here. I don't need it, or this unzipped folder. We have this package JSON, which is the same one, right? This is the unzipped version of that same one, except you'll notice, as Michael was just alluding to, that there is no node modules. So when you come in here and you do npm install, because we have that package JSON, and we go ahead and open that up again, you'll see that, I don't know what directory I'm in. Where'd it go? Okay, you'll see that there are node modules that aren't showing up in Visual Studio Code for some reason. So now there's a node modules directory, right? So where does this live? It lives in the same root folder as your package JSON. npm install builds this node modules folder, and then if I go inside of it,
I know. I remember that.
then here's all those same things that we just saw on that list, right? Rebuilt for me, and I can do that again. My God. I can do the same thing, so I destroyed them, but you can see it's back. Same stuff, right? So it's a nice repeatable operation that makes all of this possible. So what can we do if we wanted to do this ourselves? So say we built this weather dest package, right? So now we don't have a package JSON or a package lock JSON. We don't have any of that stuff. But we built this cool node stuff and we like it and it's good. And we're like, hey, we're going to create a project and share it with our friends and they're going to work. Well, we need these dependencies. Okay? And if I just run npm install right now, it's like, okay, what are you asking me for? It created a package lock JSON, which is interesting. If we look at that, there's nothing in it. But we know that we need Node geocoder and we need weather.js. So we need to create a package JSON to be able to store those dependencies. So what we do is we run npm init. Okay? Gives you some information, this utility, walk you through creating the package JSON. It's going to have some sensible defaults, but you can do whatever you want, basically. So our package name is named after our directory that we're in. We're going to change it to weatherdest. Name it after that file, right? The version 1, we're going to make it 0.0.1 because this is like the very first experimental build, right? Description, my package, entry point. This can be any file, and since that's the file we have in that folder, we're going to just default to that one. Test command, if you want to run tests, we're not going to do that yet. Who needs tests, right? If I'm on GitHub, I can put a link to the Git repository there. If I have keywords, weather, package, awesome, npm. You can put some keywords, author, me, of course, you know. You can put all kinds of stuff. You can tell it the license. You could skip through all of this stuff like we did Monday when I said, hey, yeah, do npm init and just hit enter, enter, enter. That's fine. You don't need to define it now because it'll be in the package JSON. And you can see that's an example of what the package JSON will look like when it's done. If I hit OK. If I just hit enter, it's like, yeah, okay, we're good. And you can see our package JSON now exists. So if I go ahead and open this, we now have, what the hell directory am I in? I know, I need to. I'm in the trash. I trashed my terminal, I guess. Interesting. Anyway, in my trash terminal, you can see in here, now we have our package JSON here in the garbage. And it looks exactly like that printout, right? So if I wanted to come change any of that, I could. But what can I do next? Okay, well, now I know I have Node, I have the Node geocoder and I have weather.js as dependencies. How do I get them into the package JSON as those particular versions? Well, I'm going to kill this because I don't want to work in the trash anymore. All right, look at that, nice. All right, let's just rm the package JSON and the package lock JSON again. We'll do npm init. We're just gonna default it this time because I don't care anymore. All right, so if I look at it, in here, my package JSON, again, there's not a whole lot going on, right? There's even less now because I didn't put all the fancy defaults in. So I want weather.js. Well, if you run npm install --save weather-js like so, not only is it going to install in my package, it should insert it into the package JSON. Now we have the particular version that I just installed saved in the package JSON. So anyone who uses this package after me will get the same version, right? Or at least a similar one based off of the rules they have in there. One that's close enough that it won't break the app. That's the important thing, right? Well, now I have geocoder. npm install save node geocoder. And boom, it's installed. So now if I go ahead and look, I have my node modules. If I do rmrf node modules, but then I run npm install again, I can do an ls on my node modules and you'll see weather.js and node geocoder right there. Right. Node geocoder and weather.js. All right. So the --save thankfully isn't so important anymore. I wanted to show you that because back in the day with npm, you had to do the --save to actually save them. Thankfully, newer versions of npm took a hint from their superior competitors and made it so you don't have to do that. So if you just do npm install weather-js, and then you can actually just separate them with a space, you can install them both at the same time, and it installs them in the dependency. So you don't need the --save, but you can use it if you'd like. For older versions, I think earlier than version 5, you need to do it. But since we probably won't use that, you're okay. So that's how we install dependencies in our package JSON. So what I want you to do is in 24, I want you to destroy your package JSON, destroy your package lock JSON, and install these two packages. So you have to do npm init, and then install weather.js, install node geocoder. Do that right now.
I have a general question.
Sure.
So if you do npm install, it's not going to install the weather.js and the geocode.js?
It's not going to what?
Install weather.js and geocode.
What are you asking? Like, it's going to be JavaScript files, or?
So because npm install has all of them already.
Like, on the, up in the cloud? Yeah.
So you specifically install the weather.js and
Yeah, I'm telling you specifically those two packages. Remember we just
is
used
there,
the-
is there separate from npm?
Those are separate commands, yeah. So it's npm install and then the packages you want to install. If you don't specify a package, it installs everything.
Jeez.
Not like everything in npm. It installs everything that's in your package JSON. You don't have anything defined there. Yeah, your computer would explode. If you don't have anything in there, it won't do anything.
Something about it, like the machine catches fire, you guys know this one.
Yep, exactly. Okay, when you get everything installed, just give me a quick thumbs up. When you've done it successfully. Yeah, you can put your hand down, Rolando. I saw. Thanks. Good. Need it installed, and then you need to npm install and get everything in there. You should have the node modules with all of those packages. Your dependencies should look just like this. If you got it to work successfully, do it one more time. Just to beat it into your brain, because we don't need people coming and saying, how do I install again? How do I install that package again? npm install package names, right? Alright. Almost everyone got it? Who doesn't have it? Who hasn't finished yet? Installing it. Still working on it? You stuck on anything? Alright. So I'll do it on here one more time with you all, so you can just see it one more time. I know this is pretty repetitive, but you want to be good at it, right? So I'm in 24, right? I'm just going to do an RMRF on the node modules. So those can be gone. Now we have a package JSON and a package lock. RM the package JSON, RM the package lock. Both gone. We just have README and weather desk. Right? That's what yours should look like. You can even RM the zip if you want. There you go. Even better. Okay. So what do we got to do? First things first, npm init. It's like initialize, like get init, right? Just skip to the defaults for now. They're not important. If we run an ls again, we have our package JSON now. So what do we need to do? We need to install those two packages. npm install. We have weather-js and then node geocoder. Coder. We install those. We're going to have now a package lock JSON and a package JSON. And if we cat the package JSON to see what's inside of it, we see we have our dependencies and everything's looking hunky-dory. Any questions on this process? Fist 5, how are we feeling on npm right now? Most people pretty good? That's good. Good. Cool. Take a break, see you at 8:15, and then we'll keep working.
Packages, then you go to the packages and you see all dependencies wherever you want. So you have to know what dependency of that when you say it, then you go and stuff. I like how it's just fun.
No problem, man.
So if they seem a little distracted, it's not.
It's all good.
It's not you.
Do what you need to do.
Oh, so it goes to you.
Shall return.
Local web design place.
Yeah.
I looked at it and I was like, actually, we can do that.
Totally.
So,
I don't know. Well, I'm not doing this in some side hustle shit. So. I mean, that computer. Yeah, I got that. But I'm gonna work with this. Install it. Get that in. Oh, cool, I just checked right out.
Listen, I gotta leave a little bit after 9 today. I gotta pick up the dog. And cats, but I'll watch the end of it when I get home.
It's not really better than anything right now. You don't have somebody else going there. You're not just presenting it as the first step. You gotta be able to support it. He's definitely cracking the shot. Right. Yeah, I'm just like,
All right, pretty much everyone's back. Give you like 5 more seconds, or whenever that clock turns 8:15. So not early. I don't want to take up your time with my talking. Oh, there you go. It's 8:15. All right. Okay, so we've been playing with NPM, getting kind of familiar with the Node ecosystem. One thing we did in the beginning is, I'm sure you all remember, is play with the command line a whole lot, right? And it is kind of a frustrating experience just because there's a lot of work you got to do to make sure the command line arguments are nice and that, you know, there's no bad data and that the people, like a user would even know what all the command line arguments are. Imagine if you're writing a production level script and you've got 20 command arguments. You want it to be very easy for people to know what those arguments are and very easy for them to use them, right? And ease of use comes a lot with work. There's just a lot of work that comes with a nice, easy process. So, what can we do to make this process so much easier for everybody? We can just cut out the middleman and use this sweet package called Inquirer. Now, the NPM link for it actually isn't quite working right now because they're so far ahead of what's posted on NPM for some reason, or maybe they just did a release, I can't tell. But there's this package called Inquirer, which you'll see when you look at this, that basically lets you easily embed a nice interface into your command line without doing a whole lot of work. You just install it real quick, you know, hook some stuff up, and you're good to go. So, let's take a look at how it works. I make sure I've got, okay, so just for completeness sake, I'll do an npm install, right? I already had it installed, that's okay. And then we'll just do node on this file. Alright, so I do node, this is our command line, right? And it asks me, what is your name? It's got a nice question mark, it looks good. Carson. What is your password? Just say this is a good example right here of a different type of question you can ask. This says the input is hidden. I can type a bunch of stuff in there and it's fine, no one knows. Which Pokemon do you choose? And I can actually use the arrow keys. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. And then it prints out the information that I just gave it. It's pretty easy to use, actually, which is really, really nice. So let's look at the code involved with all of that. So we have our Inquirer package. We just import it in like we do with request and FS and the weather.js and the geocoder, all of those. Very similar here, right? Inquirer is an object. It has a prompt function. Prompt takes in an array of objects that represent your different prompts. So here's some types, right? There's an input type, which is just a simple question. What is your name? And then this name right here maps to a key in the final object that you get. I'll show you in one moment. But the name is going to be the username, right? Type is password, so this one's going to be hidden from the prompt. Message set, your password, and then the name of the key is going to be password. A list, which Pokemon do you choose? Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander? And this one's going to be called Pokemon, and you just tell it's the list type, and you magically get those arrows, and the arrow keys that you can scroll with, right? And then there's a confirm, just a basic confirm. So right here, you get a response afterwards in the then function. So this is similar to the AJAX stuff, right? Where we had .then with the response, which would have all kinds of stuff. Well, we have that again with Inquirer. We have the .then. And you get a response, and all of the properties on this response are mapped to the name keys that you define in this array. So confirm, Pokemon, password, and username. That means that this response object that's coming in from Inquirer has 4 properties: confirm, Pokemon, password, and username. And you simply pull them out, right? Username, Pokemon. If I were to console log it, I can console log the whole response. It would even tell me my password. So we can see the full object. Let's run it again. And then you get this. That object prints out. Nice and easy. Your username, password, Pokemon, and then your confirmation prompt, right? So it's a really easy way to aggregate that information quickly, make it nice and easy to use, and you have to do no work to get that. You just have to hook some stuff up and voila. This is kind of the power of those NPM packages, right? There's all this free stuff we get just by reading some docs and kind of figuring out how to plug it in. It's not always that easy. This one has pretty good docs and is a pretty simple library as far as things go, but the gist of it is as you get more familiar navigating NPM and all these packages, it gets easier and easier to use this pre-baked code. So let's go ahead and look again at some other stuff we can do. So what else could we do? What other types are there? Well, if you go and look at the docs, you'll see that there's a raw list, an expand, a checkbox, an editor. There's all kinds. So why don't we try a checkbox? So I'm going to look at the checkbox docs. So if I go over here to the docs, like, okay, I want to use a checkbox. Scroll down, checkbox, okay. Type, name, message, and choices. Okay. So the choices, we could just give it a whole list of choices and a type, name, and a message. Seems simple enough. So we already have the type. We'll just change it to checkbox. The message, pick your favorite languages. JavaScript, C, SQL, right? And then this one is going to be called a language. And we'll see it print out in that final response. Okay, so let's clear this. What is your name? Carson. Put in some garbage. Sir. Okay. Press space to select, A to toggle all, I to invert selection. And press A. Got all of them. Press I, or I can select these two. Hit I, invert it. Like, this thing's pretty fancy, right? Hit enter to go through. And then it prints as the array your favorite languages, right? So that was just adding a new type in. That took how long? 30 seconds, really? We read through the docs. Oh, okay, it takes a few things. And we plug it in. There's all kinds of things you can do. There's an expand type, so it could give a bunch of options in a kind of a dense way, right? Yes, no, do something, and then you can pick one of them. And then give options based off of those, right? So there are all kinds of things you can do with this. Any questions on this Inquirer and how it works and how you might use it? It is asynchronous because it has that .then, right? Because we have to wait for user input and stuff like that, so we can't get the responses right away, right? So it's asynchronous. And that's actually a pretty good parallel to an HTTP request when you think about it. So imagine that this prompt section that we're putting up, we're building right here, is like that, the body, right? So if we're going to do a post for an API or we're going to do a GET request, this is like our URL or something. And after we call this function, before .then executes, it waits. It waits until the user's done. And when the user's done, the then response triggers and we get all the information back. Similar to how when the web server is done with its response, it sends a response back to you and the jQuery.then function triggers and we get the HTTP response. So the difference is where the data is coming from. One's coming from a user, one's coming from a web server. But in terms of asynchronous processing and Node, they're very, very similar because we're waiting on some external factor to give us a response, and we have no idea how long that's going to take, so we can't possibly program in some time to wait, right? So we need to have asynchronous programming. It's the only way it works. Make sense? Okay, so what I want you to do is we're going to spend a few minutes looking into the documentation and kind of understanding how this works, and you can look at this example as well. And then we're going to go and do an activity with Inquirer. So just spend a couple of minutes looking into it with your table, kind of getting a feel for Inquirer before we get started using it. Okay. How are we feeling about Inquirer? Just 5. How are we feeling? Feeling okay? Feeling confident we'll be able to use it? Okay. Alright. How do we install and start using Inquirer, Peyton?
Is that npm install or?
npm install Inquirer, right?
Yeah.
And then what line of code you gotta have to get it in your project?
To get it in your project, is that required?
Yep. You need
Require,
that. Exactly. You need var Inquirer equals require Inquirer. A lot of fires there. It's a mouthful. So without too much detail, how do you create a bunch of prompts, Nor?
You go to the documentation, choose one you want.
Go to the docs and choose one you want. Yeah, that's how you can figure out how to make them, right? So what do you got to do to make them?
Inquire, prompt,
That, yeah, you have to have an array of the different types of prompts, right? And pass them into the prompt function. Exactly. Yes, it's an array of objects.
Do you always have to use password or not?
No, you don't have to use password. You can take it out. You don't have to use anything. You don't even have to use confirm. Yeah, it's however you want it. It's just whatever info you want. There's no requirement other than you have the then function. And what does the then function mean? Garrett? Right, the then function's there to wait until you hit the end of your user input, and it basically knows that when the user's done, we can then continue on and use that information, right? So it's very important because without it, you're not getting anything back. All right, so here's what we're going to do then. Your next activity is going to be to create a prompt. You can do whatever you want. Use Inquirer. Make it look cool. Ask cool questions. Try to use as many of these different types as possible. You need to use at least 5 of them, right? At least an input, password, list, checkbox, and confirm. If you want to get the expand or the editor or the raw list or something in there too, by all means. But try to get those 5 in. Make something really cool. And then when we're done, maybe we'll have some of you slack out your code so we can play with them. All right? Spend about 20 minutes doing that. Go ahead and you can work with your groups if you'd like, or you can work by yourself. This is 26.
I don't know, when I'm searching the docs, I just can't find anything for some reason.
On NPM?
Yeah, for the Inquirer.
Yeah, so the NPM docs are broken. If you click GitHub,
Yeah,
see GitHub.com. With GitHub, you'll go to the GitHub docs.
Okay.
So yeah, the NPM docs are messed up. So if you go there, you'll see nothing. And if you click the link to GitHub.com to go to where I was. Sometimes that'll happen. When in doubt, go to GitHub. Remember, you're going to have to do npm init, and you can install the package, all that kind of stuff too. Root from scratch.
playing a good text game.
Flashback in the car.
There's a text game right here. You're like, there's this thing, it's in front of you. What are you gonna do? Kill the snake.
And it wasn't because it wasn't good, I just set it aside and forgot.
Well, you could do it all reading course as well.
Yeah.
I read like 2 chapters.
It's so bad. Oh man, you wrote a book and then you read it.
No, the book, I actually started reading it and it was really good, I just sat down and read probably 10 other books, but I haven't gotten that far.
Yeah, I don't read a lot. I don't read a lot of ever, so I can't really stick with it for a while. Or put it together.
I do a lot of Audible and I do a lot of like just reading on my own too. I wasn't into it when I was younger, but for some reason in the last 5 years, I picked it up and but now it's just a habit. I just do it all the time.
Yeah, I need to read more fiction and stuff because I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of programming stuff and money.
And if you enjoy that, then it's fine, but it's nice to have that.
It's more for me because I feel like my vocabulary is pretty weak. Overall, I think that's a really good thing. I'm pretty sure it's okay.
Well, that's any kind of reading, non-fiction or fiction.
Well, let's try that.
Yeah, it's like, you know, Firebase, can you go to the Firebase section, what's it right now?
So, it is all the way down.
Yeah, like Canvas generator or Express generator,
Oh, yeah.
one of those like React apps or something has there's a lot of these.
Yeah.
What about NPM?
That's not wireless. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, actually, it's really good for people who write tools.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, me and my tools, I write very few of them. If I do, it's like, this is a tool you just run, and this directory is something to process all the time.
Do you guys do spikes?
Yes, I can't choose that.
Yeah, it's like,
And they're all like
like an investigation activity with things from, they call it agile, they call it Scrum. I don't know if that's a universal thing or just something specific to Quest.
Like something went wrong, we're gonna strong,
No, it's not like a lessons learned, it's like, we know we have a task that needs to get done, but we don't have any of the details of how to get it done, what it, yeah, it's like research, yeah.
Considering we are not very agile at all.
Okay, okay. I don't know, I guess I just assumed you guys were, better than that. Anyway, I'm working on it, just gotta find my first spike in this project. Basically, the idea behind it is we have to upgrade the web service. So, I think what we probably wanna do is have a client interface request that says post an upgrade request. And then take that and push it down into the web service and say, basically, upgrade yourself, probably through another app, through another config app or something like that. Run a command line that shuts it down and does all that stuff, and then use SignalR to monitor the status of the system notifications. But this is the first time I've done any of it. I was just like, I think this is how you do it, but I don't know. So yeah, it was like.
Yeah, SignalR is good. I have actually, I've done my WebSockets in Node. With my socket IO stuff. I've not done it.
We have a monitor in there, but it, like, apparently no one's been using it because it's broken. I tried to run it and it's like not getting status updates for some reason. And it wouldn't even start. It's just like, it clearly is no one using this monitor.
I went to my boss today, my first 3 hours of work were setting up this application we have. They have this whole Telnet service that runs on ScanGuns and like boxes and stuff around.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's just a you have to like run it funny. You need an interface to communicate public. Yeah. And the setup took 3 hours. Like no one knew how to do it. I was like, I told my boss, I was like, I should just write a script right now to automate this stuff. And he's like, well, you know, we install it like once or twice a year on new guys. No, that's not that big of a deal. I was like, dude, give me 3 hours. Like that's, you know, that's money. I mean, you just lost it. You run a script done in 5 seconds. And then talking to other devs, they're all like, yeah, you know, it only breaks like once a week. And I never remember how to fix it. So it takes me an hour, a couple times a month to fix this thing. But yeah, why wouldn't you have a script already? It's going to cost you $1,000 less time to do it. It saves you that much less than a year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we had a product from that company that was deployed in Europe primarily. We're trying to bring it here. And companies, customers, were spending, I mean, thousands of professional service hours in Europe to maintain it. Well, culturally in Europe, that's acceptable. Like, they just go, well, this is the cost of doing business, right? They just gotta shrug it off. Here, we're like, oh, that's a productivity win.
Yeah.
Any way you slice it. Right? We're looking for ways to get rid of that stuff. So it was a big fight between the tech team there and the tech team here, because of course they're like, no, don't take away our you know, our money maker. And we're like, come on, give it to us and we'll make it more, you know, make it more usable.
We'll make it work in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was like a major political fight. And nothing to do with the technical side, because we're like, we know we can do this better. That's like a no-brainer. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it's just funny because I think we can automate literally everything you guys have. It's going to be harder because you're all such old, but it'll still be done.
Yeah.
The machines just have enough, even now, Windows is nothing enough to do some stuff in a better way. It's just, they don't really want to invest in a lot of infrastructure to do that.
Yeah. And from a technical management, those problems shouldn't exist anymore.
Yes, we
so
don't.
irritating.
It shouldn't take 3 hours to install it, which makes no sense, right? You know, this is like a 15-second script. You know, boom, 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 we're done. Oh, enter some information. And we're good, right? That's ridiculous.
You mentioned it 3 times.
Half of my whole pad reports. Oh my god, now I'm ever looking at those. The problem with going in the world on this keyboard in the PC world is that Alt is to command it. Control is control.
Alright, I'll give you like another minute. If anyone has a cool one they want to share, feel free to put it on Slack and I can run it after I run the example. Brutal. It's brutal, Garrett.
What?
It's brutal.
Hey, every day, man. I'm into the rejection letter. No, that was just like, what is really my news today? It was like, I was like, hey, around here.
Alright. Let's look at an example that they gave us. Then we'll play with Garrett's very depressing example. And we'll take a look at some code. Alright? So I did an npm install in here already. I have a user prompt.js. Who are you? No one. What are you doing in my house? I'm here to rob you. What are you carrying in your hands? A butter knife and a slice of toast. Can you leave now? No. Okay, fine. You can stay, but only if you say the magic password. Sorry, no, I'm calling the cops. Whoops, I messed that one up. Alright, let's take a look at that code. Okay, so we've got our inquirer. And we're going to create the prompts. And remember, this is just a list of different potential prompt types. So the first one's the input. Who are you? The next one is our list. What are you doing? I'm here to rob you. This is my house. I made you cookies. Checkbox. What are you carrying in your hands? You could pick all three. You could pick one. You could pick it none, technically. Can you leave? You could say yes or no. Doesn't matter. The confirm will let you. It's a true or false. And then your password. Okay, fine. You can say, but only if you say the magic password. So then, once we get into the then function and we actually get the response back, we can check the magic password, which is my house with a capital H. And we can console log information about the person, what they're carrying, their name. Otherwise, you can say, sorry, I'm calling the cops. So why don't we try it again, knowing the password. I made you cookies this time, but I have your TV in my hand. I will leave. And there you go. Well, a deal's a deal. No one. You can stay as long as you like. Just put down the TV. It's kind of freaking me out. So that's another example of how we can use inquirer to prompt. Alright, let's play with Garrett. And let's see what we get here. Alright. Is this working? Yes. What types of jobs will you not get? QA tester. Enter your password. Is working. True, it works. Job type. I'm not going to be a QA tester, I guess. And my password is no. Nice work, Garrett. Thank you for sharing. Cool. That was solid. How do people feel about this Inquirer stuff? Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? I think it's pretty cool. I like it a lot. I actually didn't know about it until I went through the class as the TA last time, and I saw this and I was like, wow, this is really awesome. So, it's a pretty sweet package. Alright, anyone have any questions on Inquirer before we move on? We're going to do another activity with it. You have a question, Nora? No? Cool. So what I want you to do is activity 27, this one, we're going to take that geocoder stuff we did earlier, and you're going to add Inquirer to it to inquire about the city or the state or the address. If you finish early, the TAs will slack out activity number 29, which is the zombie challenge. I haven't looked at it, but apparently it's a lot harder. So you can start on that one too. We'll spend about 15 minutes working on this, see if we can get it working, and we'll move on. Yeah. 27th, I think.
I could just actually sue them for just that some, I would not do it.
If it's global, you have to use two one.
Okay.
If it's not global, you don't. Or if it's in protected directory, so you're, for some reason, making a project in a protected directory.
Then I do sue them. But not.
Or global, because if that's global, it's going to be
Like this code?
Yeah, I just want to see which like the codes are so like my name will get searched. So address, the name of my and the vehicle names. Before I got those instructions, I thought they wanted us to like save the user and then switch their
I see.
I was trying to like write to a file, save.
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, there's not enough time to do this. Yeah, I was like, I have to link to Firebase in the back and save all the data. Check if the passwords are the same.
I thought about that too, but I didn't see that.
What here though? Alright, hold on. Oh, I typed it. This was oh. But I had like the geocode thing inside of this .gen for the entire year. I guess like really nothing is gonna happen until you type in your thing. So that's why like yeah. I think that's anything really.
All right. Let's look at how this could be done. Let me get my geocoder key. Copy that. Okay, so what do we need for this exercise? We need to, one, run npm install. First thing to do. Alright, so we need the Node geocoder, we need Enquirer. We know we need both of those to get this done, right? So set up your options with the geocoder, make sure you have your API key, and create the geocoder instance. Then what do we want to do? We want to prompt for an address, a city, state, something along those lines from Enquirer that we can pass to the geocoder and get geocode information back, right? So we can do that with an input type. You call it whatever you want. Call it input, call it address, call it location. Doesn't matter. That's up to you. And then give a nice message. What location or landmark would you like to geocode? After that, remember you can't do anything until you call the .then function and pass in a callback. That callback is going to be activated when .then is done and allow you to use that information that the user gave you to then call geocoder geocode, right? And you just directly pass that in. Then we get another callback, nested callback tree here with our data from geocoder, and it should theoretically work. So I'll show you. I'll bring the code back up, but let's just test it really quick. So it's called Enquirer geocode. Node Enquirer geocode. Phoenix, Arizona. Nice. That looks good. See if we can get Mount Rushmore. Nice. That's pretty cool. So this can actually get a lot of stuff. Let's see. 92. Von have Gilbert. Easy. Oh. Whoops. Gilbertaz. Nice. Cool. Any questions on how this worked with Enquirer and geocode, and we have the double callbacks going on here. We have a callback in the then and then a callback from the geocoder, right? Because they're both asynchronous. And even though Enquirer's asynchronous code is executed in the .then, that doesn't mean we know now when geocoder will happen, right? Because geocoder is got its own asynchronous pipeline that's got to wait for. So you can imagine that can get kind of a pain if you have like 5 or 6 nested callback functions, right? And it can, and that's why .then was invented with promises, which we'll learn more about later, but it gets rid of kind of the nesting of this stuff. It doesn't with callbacks and promises. You need to just use promises. But that's an aside. We'll worry about that later. Anyway, any questions on this before we move on? Okay, well, the TAs will slack out that solution. And there's a video activity, video review. I'll slack that out real quick. So you can go ahead and YouTube. There's videos for the last activity too, the user prompt. So if you're interested at all in the stuff we just saw with Enquirer and you want more information, then by all means, check out those videos. Okay, I'm going to close this. Trilogy. Now let's go CD examples. Maker debug. CD debug. All right. So I'm creating a new directory called debug. All right. And I'm going to npm init in there. We're going to learn about debugging in Node and how easy it is. So what I want everyone to do, we can install this together. Let me clear this. If you run, for Mac users, you're going to want to start with sudo npm install -g inspect process.
If you go back more,
To what?
so where are you in PWD, like anywhere?
Just make a new directory and npm init inside of it. This is just a new project. This right here, npm install -g inspect process, does not have to happen in any particular directory. The -g is saying global. We're installing this inspect process package from npm globally, which means you can get to it from anywhere in your machine. You don't need to have a package JSON. You can just use it. This is really useful for tools like inspect process to let us do things on a bunch of scripts. It's not so useful for something like request.js where you want to use a specific version in a specific project, right? So if we install this, I'll enter my password. It probably didn't like that. Inspect process. Alright, I don't need sudo, I guess. Okay, I installed everything. Cool. So you should see something like that when you install it. Some information about downloading and setting it up, and it should say added at the bottom. You shouldn't see any errors pop up, nothing weird happen. Okay? If you run inspect process and it says command not found, it's working, I'm pretty sure. There you go. I did inspect. Didn't give it anything, it's fine. Alright. So we have a package JSON. I'm going to touch index.js, not that. I'll open it in code. Nice. We created a handlebars template. Look at that. Alright, we have our index.js file. Nice simple file. Nothing too crazy. If I type inspect index.js, dang it. Oh. Here, this is what we're going to do. Before we do that, I want you to type this statement, debugger, at the top and put a semicolon. Just debugger on one line. If I do inspect index.js, this window pops up. And I have access to my node code in a Chrome debugger. I can step through it. You can see right here, I can see my hello printed. Hit F10. My last console log, X is 4. Hit F8 to continue, and it closes when it's done. You can very easily debug node processes with this inspect tool. Now, do you need to use the inspect tool? So these debugger statements, what they do is they say when the debugger fires, stop. Always stop at this point. And then you can manually tell it to move on. But what if you don't want that? What if you just want it to stop on entry? Inspect, I'm sure, has a way to do it. Let me look at the inspect process docs. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Inspect process wraps another process called the node inspector. Okay, and the thing that inspected that was really nice is it opened that window with the debugger for me. Now the traditional way is if I do node, I can do inspect brk and then index.js. What happens is it says there's a debugger listening on WebSocket, whatever, you know, with that port. If I open a new window of Chrome and I go to Chrome inspect, I'll see my file. Right here. It says the version of the node it's running in and the name of the file and where it is on my machine. I can hit inspect and I'm in the same place. Except now there's no debugger statement. Right? Unlike inspect.js, it's just raw. You can even go into the console log code. So this is the code for console log. Not a lot of fun. Right? Hit escape. You can see the console here. Similar process. If you hit F8, it's done. Once it's done, it just closes. Okay? So debugger, using debugger with the inspect process is a little easier to get in. If you just put it as your first statement in your script, you can test what's going on. Now, what else can we do? Let's see. Var arg equals process.argv2. Let's do inspect index.js Carson. You open up the window. Whoop. We hit F10. My argv2. You remember that that first argument that's something we pass in the command line is Carson. And we can actually see, I hit escape to open the console. It prints. Boom. You can all probably imagine how powerful debugging is. We didn't talk about it much with the JavaScript stuff. You're going to need it as we get further along in the class, because without it, it's really hard to work with. Yeah, Chris? The what? For which one? The inspect one?
Yeah, so if you go back over to the browser that you have open,
Uh-huh.
right there.
Yeah, so this is different. So this is -inspect -debug break. Okay? So this is why this node inspect break is not deprecated. This is the new version right here, this line that node promotes. They're different than inspect debug break. And the inspect process obviously isn't up to date because it's using the old one. Deprecation means it still works and it's still working in version 10. But what it's not going to do is work forever. So there could be a version soon, it could be 11, it could be 12, where there's like, this doesn't work anymore. You better change your debug processes. So you can still use the inspect-brk, inspect break, which says break immediately as soon as my app starts. Or you can just use the inspect flag if you want to do it manually. The thing is, if you do the manual setup of the debug, you have to open that debug window, chrome://inspect, and then you can see your processes. If you don't know what you're doing and you assign a port, you have to expose the port, right? So, say I want to do, here we go. I'll do node inspect brk. I'll give it port 5500. And it's gonna say, hey, we're listening. I'll open up a new Chrome window. Go to Chrome inspect and you'll notice that there's nothing. You have to go here to configure and tell it you want to listen to that particular port. Oops. Or it won't find it. Then you can open it up. I don't have that deprecation warning anymore because I'm not using that inspect process. I still get my args. So, I recommend you get familiar with this process. Learn the keys that you need to use to navigate through debugging. F10 skips a function. F11 is how you go into a function. F8 continues, stuff like that. There are these little buttons up here too. You can see there's pause execution. There's step over. There's step into, step out, and then just general step. So play with these buttons, kind of figure out what they do, learn the hotkeys. They also have like pause on exception, so if you're doing something and it blows up, you can tell it to pause immediately on that line of code that threw an exception. And so you can see exactly where your code is bad, basically. Whenever you see those errors in your console or whatever, you can tell it exactly where to stop. Yeah?
When you were in the actual execution of the JavaScript class, can you still set breakpoints on what
Yes,
and so forth?
sure. So if I open this back up in the Chrome Inspector, I want to set breakpoints right there and there. It stops at the debugger, then it stops there, then it stops there, and then it finishes. So this is pretty cool, I think. What do you guys think? But it gets better, because we all use VS Code. And VS Code has the best node debugging. And right now I'm literally in VS Code. And it does this for me. I pressed F5 and it started debugging my code, my node script. I can see everything here. I didn't pass in a command line argument, right? So you'd have to make changes there so you can see my arg is still undefined. So it's going to print in the debug console, hello undefined. But just like the Chrome Inspector, I can do it all from here. And here's the rules, right? Oh, press F5 to continue. So it has slightly different key bindings. So what happens is, when you do this one, when you press F5, you get no configuration, it just runs it. You tell it you want it to run for node. I think you can do args, right? And I could pass in Carson. I could come here again. And now my arg is Carson. I can see everything that's going on. It's pretty awesome. Go to the debug console here instead of the terminal. You can even look on the side. I can see all my variables that are in memory at that time and what they're doing. Here's my exports variable, my module variable, all kinds of things that you don't see explicitly. Return values of functions you call. This is very powerful stuff and will change a lot of how you do things. No more console logs everywhere, right? Just debug it. You can see the call stack if you want to get into that. All kinds of stuff. Break on exceptions. The Visual Studio Code debugger is very powerful, and I recommend you figure out how to use that one. But the Chrome Inspector, understanding how it works and understanding how to start it when you don't have Visual Studio Code is important because it works as long as you have Chrome, and pretty much every machine has Chrome, so you can assume it'll be there. Any questions on this debugging? I recommend you Google this, kind of learn more. There's a lot to debugging. I could probably spend an hour going over it with you. But just know that it exists and it's really, really powerful. Okay, I'm going to Slack out another video guy, or no, I'll do that. I'll put that in GitLab. Okay, so activity 29 was Slacked out to the channel. So if you want to do that, it's like a harder thing, a hard activity you can do with Inquirer. Excuse me. Otherwise, I say play with the debugger a bit, kind of figure out how these node modules work and these node packages with NPM and stuff. Get used to that. Fistify, how are we feeling about Node after this first week? Feeling okay? Most people feeling okay? Good. Cool. If you don't have any questions, that's class. That's all I got.